Welcome to the Private Lender Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Private Lenders Podcast. Chris and Jason here. As always, we appreciate you checking out the show wherever you might be listening or watching. As always, sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com, our community of private hard money lenders. Go check it out anytime and create a free account, hardmoneymastermind.com. All right, today we're going to be talking about some industry events over the years. And one of the reasons why this came up is because we got some feedback from a podcast listener saying that they were discussing this podcast at a recent industry event. And over the past couple of years, I've been interested in getting back into that. So we're going to take you through a little story over the years, like how we've, had our focus on different kinds of events, during HMB's 16-year history. But it started with going to the Pitbull conference shortly after we closed our very first loan. So closed our first deal in December of 2007. And January or February, we were on a plane going to Vegas to check out what at the time was probably the only industry event, at least the only one that we were aware of. We were new, we were young, we were green in the business and just looking to learn more, make connections. And to be honest, we met some people at that event 15 plus years ago that we're still in contact with, still do business with, are friends with. That's how it started.
What's interesting is even though when we went to that event and we didn't have a ton of experience in running our own private lending company, our own hard money company, but we did have experience in business, real estate investing, lending in general. Just it wasn't our own money or our capital that we were controlling. It was other people's capital and stuff like that. And I still remember being like, you know what? There's a lot of schmoes in this room. There wasn't a lot of sophistication. It felt like we were still kind of above a lot of them. It just goes to show about the real estate industry in general and the private lending industry in general. The barrier to entry is not all that high. If you're motivated and you're ambitious and you're smart and, being a private lender is not the hardest thing in the world. It's not like being a brain surgeon, right? You can learn it and you can learn it on the fly. And, if you have kind of good core traits and you're motivated and you want to do it the right way, there's plenty of stuff to do that. And, back then there was no education to do so. I mean, this is also pre-YouTube and things like that. So there was no education, but I do remember being in there and being like, yeah, I'm just not all that impressed by a lot of the folks. And I think that we could do it better. And I think one of the reasons why we started the lending company the way that we did, and we were very frontward focused with our clients, both borrowers and capital investors. And we provide a lot of content. We provide a lot of value. I guess we were young, we were ambitious. We were doing a lot of content. We didn't want to run the business like the old school lenders did, which is, hey, old school banking ways. Hey, I'm going to wear a tie to work and I'm going to, I control all the money. I'm going to make all the rules. We kind of hated that aspect. And I felt like, a lot of the folks in that space were like that. And, even though we might not have directly planned to do it this way, I feel like, we were like, we're going to do this the way that we see fit. And, we're going to be very front focused, client driven, and provide extremely good customer service and try to do good deals for real estate investors over and over and over and over.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we did have a different take on it at that time. And the industry has evolved since then, right? There wasn't the Jurassic conference, the few conferences they do a year, although he was one of the people that we met at that very first one.
That's right.
There wasn't the AAPL, American Association of Private Lenders, yet. And then recently the NPLA, National Private Lender Association, owned by John Hornick, bought the Pitbull conference. So that became a different thing it is now. So a lot of these events really have matured. They've grown up. I take a look at all of them and I want to get involved again, especially now that some of the institutional money has started to phase out a little bit, because that was just not with those events having that much focus on that kind of capital and running your company in that way. It just wasn't all that interesting to us. I didn't think that, based on the fact that we're all private capital, that we would get that much value from it. So we kind of went in a different direction for some years. We went into the direction of marketing primarily, and some other real estate focused stuff. But we got, since from day one, we got very, very into web marketing. And then like in years, like, 2 to 7 kind of, we really went all in that space. And we were hitting like affiliate marketing conferences in New York and Vegas. We were in Russell Brunson's mastermind group to really step up our marketing game. And a lot of our focus was there. Like we knew we were running a good lending company. We had a business coach who was like very instrumental in helping us like grow an organization. And we just wanted to go all in on, getting the phone to ring, bringing leads in the door, having that being like the gasoline, the engine for the whole company.
We flew out to Arizona to build out our Infusionsoft CRM in the way that we felt was best for our operation, because there wasn't much industry. I mean, there was the mortgage office, but that was the only kind of servicing software then. And I don't even know if they had like an origination platform then, but we built out our, thinking back, we built out our CRM that way. Like we, in essence, figured out, mostly build, business building stuff and marketing related stuff more than industry specific stuff, because there just wasn't that much good industry specific stuff back then. And a lot of the business coaches that we had were, for us as business owners on the finance side, on the business side, on the employee and hiring growth, we did a lot of team building activities, to retain company culture and things like that. But like you said, I don't think it was intentional, but we never felt that some of the industry specific events were relevant to us because they were all institutional backed. As institutional capital kind of came in this space, it wasn't what we were looking to do. We weren't looking to take on institutional capital. We were, continuing to raise private capital with the long-term goal of being as self-funded as possible, where we replace our investors' capital with our own personal capital, because that's where the real magic happens in this. If you're lending other people's money, typically, I don't want to say you're giving up half of the profits, but that's where it ends up being. Obviously, you need your cherished relationships with your capital investors, and they're important. But if you're the capital investor and you're bringing in the business and originating the deals, you're making twice the amount. And for the most part, you can get about a 20% rate of return. If you're lending out at anything halfway decent, think about this. If we're lending out at 13-3 and we lend that same capital out twice a year, you're making 6% on the points plus 13% on the interest plus, some miscellaneous fees. You're making 20% on your capital. It's a good way to do so. So the point being is it was mostly institutional backed kind of sources and vendors associated with institutional back capital, and it didn't see fit. A lot of these lenders were lending nationwide. We were only local. We've only lent in our local markets until we expanded into some other strategic markets local to us on the East Coast. So I don't know. For us, it just never seemed relevant. It just, we know a lot of people in those spaces. It didn't seem relevant, but that doesn't mean that today things are slightly different. And we can also talk about kind of how one of the ways that we kind of do things, if we feel like there's nothing that can kind of help us in that space, we're just going to create our own, like we did with our meetup group locally when we felt, that was a better way, to run a RIA or meetup group. And we've done that with our Hard Money Mastermind group as well.
Yeah. I mean, we in essence created what we wanted there to be in the industry, and we'll touch on that some more. I just wanted to throw in that I think that the industry events out there like the AAPL and Jurassic are becoming more relevant for us now. And part of that comes from the feedback that we hear from the podcast listeners. Like the fact that the Private Lender podcast has grown like it has, and the mastermind group has grown like it has, and the inner circle tells me that there is a good size audience out there for what we put out in terms of content and how we run our lending company. There is an audience for that. People are interested in doing it like we do it. And as some of the institutional money phases out and private capital's, back in style, I think that we would get more value and potentially provide more value in industry events, speaking on panels and stuff like that, like we've done in the past, more so now than in the past, like 6 or 7 years, if that all makes sense. And yeah, like same with the mastermind group. So like I mentioned before, we were in Russell Brunson's mastermind, and it was so valuable, so impactful, having a high level room of people, in that case, working on different stuff, different industries, but same goals in mind, in essence, in terms of growth and how we run marketing and sales and conversion and all of that stuff. It was so impactful. We wanted to create one specific to the private lending industry. And that's what we did with the Inner Circle. That kind of was a expansion of hardmoneymastermind.com. And the people in the group were about 15 or 20 lenders. We do a couple events a year. Next one's coming up in Nashville in November. And just the feedback that we get from that group, how much value they get, how it really impacts their business and life and everything else, tells us that it was important to do so. The industry needed it. People are getting a ton of value from it. And the fact that we can provide that in all these different ways, podcast included, is very, very cool. It's very cool, and we want to increase it.
Yeah, no doubt. And, again, just like anything else, I mean, it's this type of, private lending, hard money lending. I mean, I guess maybe it's niche. It's kind of what we know and what we've always gravitated towards. It's not the only way to do it. I'm not, saying, hey, don't use institutional capital or do it this way or that way. There's lots of different ways to do it. We just felt like this is the right way, and this is the way that we've always done it. And I do truly believe that a lot of folks that have gone down the institutional route are trying to get back into, hey, maybe I really just want to be dealing with private capital and I don't want to go the institutional route anymore because it's volatile. Maybe it's short-lived. I have less control. And if you can control kind of your own capital, yours or other capital investors' capital, you just have a lot more flexibility in this space. And the beauty of it is there's always going to be opportunities in the space, especially if it's capital that you control. There's so much. And, obviously this space was very heavy in the fix and flip market forever, and it still is. That being said, if you're a business that you are reliant on doing dozens and dozens and dozens or hundreds of transactions a year, or a month, that's hard to do. That's challenging to do, right? When the real estate market was great and fix and flippers were buying 100 deals a year, there was lots of room for that. But a lot of those fix and flippers are doing 10% of what they were doing before. So, and that shouldn't scare you. That shouldn't put you out of business. You just need to be in a space where you don't have to do tons and tons and tons and tons of volume. It's about bottom line profitability, not top line units. and I think a lot of folks and the industry kind of got away from that. Most private lenders or hard money lenders, they do a few deals a month. They're in a good spot. They're high margins, high profit by doing that. And guess what? If fix and flips don't have, that enough inventory, that you're not doing enough in that, you can do small balance commercial properties. We can do whatever you want, right? You can figure out how you want to structure your lending company to see that sees fit for you. I would just encourage you to, if you're not already, entertain the private capital side of it. It's going to make your life a lot easier and a heck of a lot more flexible. And with the goal of eventually trying to be that capital investor yourself, because that's where the real kind of magic happens and you can make a lot more money, on each individual transaction.
Yeah, for sure. So all that being said, I think we are going to get involved again in some upcoming industry events. We don't have anything on the books quite yet, but I think maybe later this year or in 2024, you will see HMB at some industry stuff. If anybody wants to hit us up about speaking on panels or anything like that, happy to do so. Hit us up at hardmoneybankers.com. Appreciate you guys checking out the podcast as always, and we'll see you here next time on Private Lenders Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.